afternoon, colleagues, friends. We have the honor to be part of this closing panel discussion of our event, which focus on the procedural adaptations for promoting legislative modernization and digital transformation. Coincidentally, I had the privilege to moderate a similar panel 2 weeks ago with our friend Grande, with the participation of Kevin McCumber, the clerk of the House of Representatives, the clerk of the House of Commons in Canada, and also James Pinell from the CPA. Now it's an even more interesting discussion with colleagues from subnational parliaments and Wade as a voice here thinking about this topic for a really long time. So, Wade, I need to tell colleagues that this panel exists because of our recent conversations and thoughts. So I'd like to thank you for the inspiration to build this discussion as well today.
You're welcome. Obrigado.
Thank you. Today in this closing panel, our goal is to think how can parliaments do what I consider to be one of the most challenging things, to update or reform or to adapt the internal rules or procedures or the standing orders of the institution. We know that these standing orders, they are built over time, over decades. They are the bedrock of the reliability of parliamentary business, and that the trust between the members and the institution, that all of the members will be treated equally under the legislative process. So I'll try to bring some thoughts for us to think here on how can we move forward in adapting these rules, not necessarily to artificial intelligence or generative artificial intelligence, let alone ChatGPT, is to think how can we make the legislative process more ready to the future, to 5, 10, 20 years from now. How can we adapt these rules of procedure in a sense that they remain open and flexible to include new scientific and technological developments, and at the same time keeping the principles that make the legislative process reliable for all the members within our institutions. So I'd like to, before I start with the proposed questions, yield the floor to each one of our colleagues and friends to introduce themselves. Wade and Bernice, I will excuse with you. You have already introduced yourself to the colleagues. I'll ask our 2 colleagues that have not participated yet in the event to introduce themselves, please. Ms. Tatiana Cunha, if you can introduce yourself.
Meu nome é Tatiana Mendes Cunha.
I am Legislative Director of the Legislative Assembly. I joined here when I was 18 years ago, and now I take this position of Legislative Director. It's a pleasure, an honor to participate in this panel with these authorities and experts in AI. For me, I feel it like an honor. I am honored to have accepted this invitation by Mario, and I hope I will meet your expectations. Obrigado, senhora Tatiana Cunha, por favor.
Yourself to the colleagues.
Thank you, Luís. I'm Wade Ballou, just recently retired from the Office of the Legislative Council in the House of Representatives in the USA. I was the head of the office for the last 8 years. And in that capacity, I really began thinking out of necessity about what it is we're doing, how we can do it better, where and how we can find and reduce the pain points, not just in our office, but throughout the legislative process. And relating to that, then in that process, I actually met Luís, and he has broadened my view, not just to the House and the U.S., but really to the entire world, with the recognition that we all face very similar problems and challenges. but a better way to think about them as opportunities to serve our citizens better and really to serve each other as nations a lot better. So thank you once again for having me, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Wade, for your introduction and your kind words. Bernice, would you like to reintroduce yourself for the colleagues as well?
Sure. I'll be very brief. I only just introduced myself a little while ago, but I am my job is clerk assistant in the Queensland Parliament, and I manage the committee office there. And I forgot to mention earlier that I should just clarify any views that I expressed today are my views, and they're not necessarily the views of the Queensland Parliament or the Parliamentary Service. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernice. Luís Fernando, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Uma boa tarde de felicidade a todos.
Congratulations to all of you. I'd like to thank the Legislative Assembly for having me here right now. Dr. Ribeiro, Mario Gugel, I thank you all, guys. I am the Federal Senate clerk for 40 years. We actively participate in the Interlegis program, which has the bold aim of integrate the Brazilian legislative. We cover 5,608 municipal chambers and 27 houses of the Federation, the Brazilian Federation. And in this time, we're called upon to develop a system to support the legislative, to automize the legislative houses. Since 2005, we've been doing this work. And lately, if we take a look at artificial intelligence at the service of the legislative, we notice it's already possible to draft actually a law with a basement or based on jurisprudence. In that sense, in this line, we've been developing this work as part of our workflow. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Luís Fernando, for your participation and for your introduction. Bernice, allow me to bring my first question to you. As I mentioned to you, not necessarily adding specific technologies or even less so specific tools to the rules of procedure, the standing orders. Rather, what are the advantages and the obstacles of adding innovation or modernization principles that we all have been discussing here for 2 days within the rules of procedure? And do you think that would create an obstacle? Do you think that would enable further evolution within the modernization of the Parliament? And secondly, how could procedural staff, such as yourself, as the clerk of the Parliament, could ensure that these provisions are actually followed through? You know, they are actually implemented in the day-to-day operations of the legislative process.
Okay, thanks, Luís. Yeah, I struggle a bit with this question because I'm not really sure we can incorporate such principles directly into rules of the House or rules of procedure, because those are just tools that are there to advance, the rules I mean, are just there to advance the Parliament's broader functions. And in Queensland, the standing orders and the rules are determined by the House itself. So it's by way of a motion to adopt changes to or to adopt new standing orders. And unless we have a hung Parliament, it usually means that government support is required. So we have a House committee in Queensland, the Committee of the Legislative Assembly, which considers all changes to standing orders. It's bipartisan, it's chaired by the Speaker, and its Secretariat is the Clerk of the Parliament. And we do put suggestions for change to that committee from time to time, very much driven by when opportunities arise. For example, if there's an election or a change of government, then we, for example, or an opportunity like the COVID pandemic presented, for example. That was certainly an opportunity where, arising out of necessity, we were able to look at suggesting changes to enable Parliament to keep functioning. But unless there's a necessity, I don't always see a will to change, and certainly not necessarily to a principles-based type model. And I suppose one reason that will to change orders isn't always there is because as members of Parliament, I suspect that members of that committee are usually busy thinking through the implications of rule changes on them now, but also should there be a change of government and what does it mean for them if they were then in opposition or on the other side. So I struggle a bit with that question. But an opportunity might be something like, well, we've had a situation where there was a commitment as part of an election commitment to change the way that the budget scrutiny process is undertaken. And that came from a deep frustration about, the way it was happening at the time for the last 5 or 10 years. So that gives us an opportunity to think about possibilities to improve parliamentary scrutiny of public money. And obviously there are now new technologies around that would help to support a new approach to scrutiny than were there last time the standing orders were reviewed. So it might be that we could look at how committees report on proposed expenditure and make a requirement that they, as part of the budget scrutiny process, that they do look at specific aspects like a direct comparison of thematic expenditure across government year on year, and make a requirement, for example, that ministers must respond and explain such any identified anomalies by a committee. That's not necessarily a current rule. And that wouldn't necessarily require anything that's specifically about AI to be put into the standing orders. It's more, the broader rule has an implication that if there are new technologies available to achieve that broader rule, then it's almost a given that it be used. AI is just an enabler that committees would use, for example, to assist with their budget analysis. But windows of opportunity can close too. So you do have to sort of think about your timing and being aware of the political landscape and being strategic about when to put proposals for change forward. And thinking about how to put them up, like finding champions amongst members of Parliament, for example, who have influence is one way. Sometimes a member may have seen things done differently because of the role that they played before they came to Parliament, and they can the enthusiasm for adopting new approaches can be harnessed, and members obviously talk to each other a lot. So if that's a person with influence, then perhaps that will create a will, in a sense. In terms of, I'm just thinking about digital accessibility, and when we do suggest changes to standing orders, we should try to think broadly about possibilities that don't exist yet. For example, I mentioned earlier the meeting papers product that we use for committee meeting papers. It has the capacity for an electronic vote to occur outside of a committee meeting. So we just call that a vote outside committee meeting. It's sort of otherwise known as flying minute sometimes. So the standing orders used to refer to a vote. It didn't actually provide for a vote being taken outside, so it didn't envisage that. And then when the possibility came up, we had to look at changing the standing orders so that a digital vote could be allowed, not just a meeting being called. So that now happens, but out of an abundance of caution, the rule says that members all have 72 hours to respond, but the new technology means it actually can be done instantly, almost. So, they're a cautious group of people, I think. There are certainly opportunities. It's about finding the moment and being fairly broad and thinking about new opportunities when you're suggesting change. The fact that things are changing so fast needs to be considered. In terms of the second part, I guess The role of staff is ensuring that principles that underpin any parliamentary activity are not lost, so through the advice that they give. So for example, just because there's an ability for a chair to propose a vote on a matter outside a committee meeting doesn't mean that they should always use it. So staff need to, and if they did, and if they were using it, for example, to shut down debate or prevent a member from speaking on something that they wanted to speak about, then I imagine that rule would be changed back very quickly, and the freedom or the benefit that the technology is enabling would be not allowed to be used, because it would be preventing rather than promoting the ability for a member to participate in and represent their position. So I think that's probably where I'll stop.
Thank you, Bernice, for your opening thoughts. I'd like to invite Luís Fernando now. And Luís Fernando, we discussed a lot here in Brazil with colleagues from the Senate, some core principles of the legislative process for us here. Bernice mentioned two of these: not shutting down the debate, so allowing time for civic participation, also respecting the parliamentary minorities. We have the access to data in a timely manner for the debates, the adherence to the rules of procedure, in our case here in Brazil, the Constitution as well, because the Constitution also brings considerations about the legislative process. And last but not least, I would bring also for you maybe to comment a little bit on the legislative process being grounded on evidence-based data. So would you like to comment on that? So how, if it would be advantageous to incorporate these principles, that we could call innovation principles or open parliament principles, as we wish. Do you think it would be interesting to add those in the rules of procedure of the institution to further advance these discussions in the parliament? And how do you see the role of the procedural staff working in this domain?
Staff nesse domínio também.
Temos
We do have an example that is from pandemics, where parliaments were not ready to function. That is why they were created. The remote deliberative sessions, the Senate was pioneering this instance, and then for that reason, for that matter, we began to think about on how to regulate these actions. There's an unexpected situation that came up over us. And I see that the principle of the legislative process, in order to have this transparency, equity, and today we have a compliance, so we're doing this, a governance. At the moment that we believe that the artifact of artificial intelligence may be interjected to the use in an ethical manner in Parliament, should really be put into resolution or in these procedural, even in the organization of this rules of procedure that could deal with the parity of these actions. So this is just an example here that I'd like to bring it up to all the panel in this regard. In 2020, there was a first bill of law from the federal Senate talking about artificial intelligence. This bill was incorporated to others, and ended up being filed, but in 2023 came out another bill covering those guidelines. Of course, when you have a law, this law must be regulated. But in this regulation, the public entities and bodies that could, in that case, to adopt by infralegal norms, this works in Brazil, and in this way, dealing artificial intelligence in a better way. So today we have another bill of law, 2023-2028, was passed in the federal Senate, that this year came to in March this year, the deputy chamber. It is amazing that, not credible as they put it here, that this bill of law will be going through six different commissions. So imagine, when will that be passed, this bill into a law, instead of a very quick, I don't see a quick horizon here. So what could be created within these resolutions, so-called modular legislation, that at a moment that by putting some clauses of update, every time that an AI is harmful or contrary to what the society would entail, let's say, restrictions of certain AIs, but in a document or of the authorities in these entities that we have. Thank you.
Luís, obrigado. Wade, would you like to comment on this question as well?
Thank you, Luís. Yeah, generally, as I think about rules, I think more than just the formal rules that are adopted as the rules of procedure in the House. I think of the protocols and directives that are included as well, and recognizing that all of these are written in the sense of a conclusion or a result. That a couple of cases that I mentioned yesterday, 1929, a change in the rules resulted in the comparative print being required as part of a committee report. Another change in the rules led to the office developing our comparative print tool, much updated a number of years later, that we began in 2016. So as I think about how to incorporate these ideas into the rules, it's much more asking the question of what result do you want? Not prescribing how to get there. So I agree with the observations that let the technology develop, particularly as we've been talking at this conference, the ways of agile development, modular development allows for improvements at the operative infrastructure level without having to go back to the rules themselves in some form. So, for example, with AI, the House of Representatives has adopted this overarching document that seeks to govern the use of AI in the House. I'm imagining that will change over time as everybody becomes more comfortable, and I'm imagining that document will become more detailed, more directive, and keeping the overall guidance at that level then allows for innovation. Another aspect that I think is really important in how you ensure that this remains in the rules or in process for the long term is actually a people-based relationships of continuing to be reporting back, reporting up, working across silos, reducing silos so that you're all working together and you're working to build the kind of culture that we've been talking about over the last couple of days. Kind of one of the things that I've been amazed at actually is the similarity between managing people and helping people to improve kind of in a continuous way is very similar in, I think, lots of ways to managing and working with data. We're interested in quality in both cases. We're interested in continually to improve how the technology works. We're interested in continuing to upskill all of the people who work in the legislative process. And that really is, I think, very similar. And so I would think about applying those kinds of concepts. As that happens, and as successes happen, then the new quickly becomes that's just the way we do things. And so as people are onboarded, they are just introduced into that's the way we do things. And so you will have reset the expectations, as well as because of continuing relationships, you will provide the opportunity to modify those over time as needed and as technology continues to provide whatever is after AI.
Thank you, Wade, for your considerations. Tatiana?
O sistema
The system to be created must discipline artificial intelligence in such a way that it follows the principles, because this technology is progressing very quickly. So we would have to ensure the compliance of digital compliance, transparency, technological transparency. I think that the citizen participation is also quite important. Voting, remote voting. During pandemics, Legislative Assembly did not stop for one day because we already had a system in place that was working absolutely free from in-person attendance, and voting were made all over the state. So a congressman had COVID in the city of Pau dos Ferros, far away, another one in another city, Caicó, they would vote remotely. This is one of the principles that I think that should be existing as a principle predicability. So I think that above all, we must archive and preserve our output. We must do that digitally. That is to say, we need to think about a number of rules that would not bind, would not hinder the evolution of technology, but to ensure that AI will be made possible in a reliable manner. So people have some kind of prejudice in regards to AI. I feel that. I even joked that they watched a lot of the Terminator movie, and so they need to let go of that conception for us to make a better use of what AI is to offer. So I read in a journal in Brazil, the UAI are legislating within AI. I don't know what would that entail, because I do not believe that we can do that without popular referendum. Popular referendum is done by congressmen, by the parliaments. We need them. We cannot just let go, not just use AI. So I have an impression that we're discussing quite a lot in these 2 days, but we don't have an idea where will that end, because we have so many great possibilities. So I think that regulation of these rules must be based on principles. Very good, thank you. Só algo para nossos colegas aqui. Aqui na casa.
There is a very interesting experience from the U.S. House where they have a committee in House Administration which harbors a subcommittee on modernization which discusses this topic. And this subcommittee used to be an actual committee, a select committee on modernization of the U.S. House of Representatives. So we usually find these groups to be very effective spaces for these discussions involving the members, involving civil society, staff as well. So that's something that we used to have here, Luís, at the Chamber of Deputies. Not sure if we still do, a group of study of the rules of procedure. And I remember I participated in several meetings a few years ago to discuss how to modernize the rules of procedure specifically. So this is a constant review effort that is very healthy for the legislatures, for the members to endure, even if no change is supposed to be applied, but at least it is to be discussed constantly and evaluated according to the new necessities that the parliaments understand and map. And with that, I'd like to bring my second question to you, Wade. Even with all of that, let's consider the best case scenario with the support of the members, with all of the internal, I would say, infrastructure, let's call it this way, the procedure infrastructure. Still, I understand that the better part of the modernization efforts still they hint on on how you commit and how, as you said, you involve the staff. How are your staff involved in this discussion and in this project to modernize the institution, the legislature, the parliament? So, what are your thoughts on to secure your staff support for these efforts? And how can we cultivate this innovative culture in our offices in the parliament? And lastly, how can we ensure that the adoption of these new tools do not lead to an over-reliance of our staff in these tools to perform the duties that they used to perform before without them? So I know it's a big question, so please feel free to use the floor for the time you consider to be needed.
Thank you, Luís. For this question, it is big, and for those of you who were here yesterday, the key to development was grandmother's cookies. They won't work in this context, so you need more than grandmother's cookies. It really needs to begin, I believe, with the leadership of the office. And adopting an innovation, kind of a constant improvement mindset, one that does use a roadmap, which would be a long-term strategic plan of some kind. The one that we've been using in the House actually is like a 10-year plan, which we then divide up into smaller chunks. And as things happen, that plan gets modified. So very much like Sean was sharing yesterday, think about your 5-year plans. With that, really adopting the culture of it is great to experiment and encourage your staff to be willing to come up and experiment and want to try something. Whenever they succeed, that's a great time for celebrating that success. If something does not succeed, that's good news as well, so you know that that is not going to proceed. And that also actually is a time to celebrate the fact that we've learned something. But in that case, the the failure is not punished. And so really trying to remove fear from the office culture itself. And then I also mentioned kind of the change management process of ADCAR. So, you know, the awareness of issues, the desire to change, providing knowledge, the training and reinforcement, all would be important to just incorporate as a natural way to do things. Part of that, then, in addition, would be that as you actually plan a particular project or a particular piece of work, work that plan well. Right before you begin, bring everybody involved together and make sure everybody knows what their role is. And then execute the plan and be prepared to adjust because in my view, the only reason for a plan is that when something goes wrong, and it will, you know what to get back to or what you're working toward. And finally, I think the most important piece is the after-action review. Sit down with everybody involved and as the senior person, reflect on what your role was in that plan. How did it go? What could be improved? Be open, be vulnerable, and in that way invite others to do the same. Make that meeting a safe place where each person can own their part of what happened, celebrate what succeeded, and then acknowledge what a person indicates that they will do to improve. Incorporate all that into the next piece of work that you're going to do. And with that mindset, being open, vulnerable, being willing to be humble, that will encourage everybody else to do the same. And in that way, you can continue to identify what the highest goals are and continue to work toward that. So that's where I would take that particular piece. Now, there's another part of your question that is equally important, and that is, what do you do to prevent over-reliance? And so kind of the nightmare scenario of, for whatever reason, your technology is not available. You've planned backups, et cetera, and all that fails, and you're left with a pen and a pad of paper. Do you have the knowledge as a drafter to go into the chamber and sit down and write a bill on the fly, write an amendment to a bill on the fly? Does the floor staff have the ability to receive that piece of paper and process it so that the work of the members will continue and they can say what they need to say on the issue? Because if your technology is not available, chances are something not good happened. For whatever reason, it's not available. There are a couple of ideas I've heard. One is to intentionally require attorneys every so often, whatever the appropriate period might be, to literally not use their technology at all and to actually have to write from scratch. I think that's a little draconian, but that is an idea that I've heard. I think something that more helpful would be to remember that paper actually exists and is important. I would keep a hard copy of the kinds of phrases I use, the forms, like the book that Andy just talked about what's common in a lot of kinds of legislation. Having that available as a resource is helpful. And if all else fails, ideally, the more senior you are, you just shut your eyes and work from muscle memory and hope it works. One of the things that we said in tax. And so I worked for about 25 years in tax, and whenever one of these very complex big tax bills was finally leaving the office, kind of the final conference report on its way to final passage and being signed into law, we would kind of collectively say, well, hope it works.
Thank you, Wade, for your considerations. Before I yield the floor to Bernice, aside from that specific case from the cookies, do you have any other case to illustrate these elements you're saying? Or any specific? We can come back to that. No worries. If not, none come now.
Say a bit more about what you have in mind, because I've got a feeling you've got something in mind.
Oh, no. I'd just like to hear the specific examples from what you're describing. Like Kirsten's mom cookies, something like that, that you can give for colleagues that then can actually bring home, say, oh, okay, maybe I can have a similar idea.
You might try some exercises. It's not something that we typically do, but it takes me back to the early days that I had in the office. We had a robust practice on the floor of the House, where when a bill was under consideration, the drafter for that bill was on the floor, and it was a time which members would actually debate the merits of the bill back and forth. Other members would listen to that debate and occasionally would have an idea for compromise or offering something similar. We would be called on the spot to write the amendment that accomplished what that member had just seen. And on one occasion, I was writing feverishly to try to capture what this member wanted. He had been recognized under our 5-minute rule, and so he began talking long before I was ready, and he used up all his 5 minutes, looked over at me, and he got ready to sit down, and I looked back up at him because, I was in the chair writing away, and I said, keep talking. So I wrote for another couple of minutes, and then, we finally got the actual amendment up front, so it had to be read, by the reading clerk, so that when members came to vote, they actually knew what they were voting for, and not just whatever the member said, which I didn't hear a word of. I was too busy trying to write what I thought he wanted.
Thank you very much, Wade. Bernice, would you like to comment on this topic as well?
Sure, thank you, Luís. I totally agree with Wade in terms of the importance of trying new things and encouraging people to have a go and, recognising that mistakes happen. And I think that in any normal workplace, the ability to make mistakes or celebrate mistakes might be something to encourage, but I do have some caution about it in our work environment because mistakes are really high profile and sometimes can have significant implications. So while I agree with that, I think there's a need for caution in doing it. The stakes are too high not to have some caution. And a couple of practical examples might be piloting, having a go in a small space first. For example, if you were adopting a new committee meeting papers system, you might trial it for staff meetings first or in-house meetings. And that's a low-risk environment. It lets you evaluate it and make adjustments and think about what you might need to do in the real environment. And the side benefits, of course, are that staff can then learn the product and system very well. They can identify other uses for it, possibly, and they can then use it when they're thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, doing these sort of business process mapping type exercises when you have some downtime. That can help reduce the risk because you can tighten up the potential problem areas before you roll it out into a live environment. And it occurred to me too that it could be a useful thing to put on our standard staff meeting agendas, what does the latest research say about this issue? And, have it as a standard item, assign a staff member to come and report back on what they've found through a literature review on the latest research, and report back to everybody as a discussion item at the next staff meeting. Again, these will help people think carefully before having a go, so that it reduces the risk as far as possible. In terms of the over-reliance risk, I think Wade, I've got nothing to add to what Wade said in terms of the legislative drafting process, because I would agree, urging caution in using it for actual drafting, because somebody needs to know how to be the human checker at the other end. And if nobody's been a junior drafter because that job's been done by somebody else, then, by something digital, then we've got a bit of a problem. For the committee stage of the legislative process, I think risks of over-reliance are reduced a little, partly because, in my experience, members themselves of committees are going to question very thoroughly anything that might be produced by artificial intelligence of any sort, if it's something they don't agree with. So if the recommendations are something that they think that they don't support, they'll be challenging it very, very thoroughly, and staff will be needing to defend it, to explain where it came from, and they don't want to be in that position of not being able to do that. So I think that the over-reliance risk is a bit lower there. Not only are members themselves questioning, but if a staff member briefed a committee based on information that had been largely sourced from AI, and a committee member relied on that in a committee hearing, perhaps with an expert witness, they're going to look foolish. The staff member's going to not be trusted anymore. Again, it's those really high stakes that sort of have their own impact of making people sure that they've got their information right before they give it to somebody. So they do that checking. And I guess all of these mean that the skills of our staff in assessing and communicating policy issues around a legislative proposal and the potential impacts of what's proposed remain at the forefront of our work. I guess where there could be some risk with over-reliance, if they did it, is in the scrutiny of bills and subordinate legislation for compliance with the rules for legislation. So we have a requirement, all committees, when they examine a bill, have to look at compliance with the Legislative Standards Act and also with the Human Rights Act. So there's a human rights sort of compliance assessment with every bill inquiry. And we have a small team that's focused on supporting all of the committees to do that, to make those assessments. And I can see significant benefit in using AI tools in that task, because, comparing legislation's apparent compliance, checking precedents, including court decisions about human rights, comparing previous advices that have been given to committees. It's essential for a human team member to be reviewing and assessing for themselves, because of all the nuance that's involved in not only determining whether something is a direct comparison or a direct precedent, but thinking about how to communicate it and in a political context, because they're constantly having to think about how they present information. It's not just the information itself. So staff can't hand that over to anybody else. It's that human skill that's probably the number one thing that we employ our staff for. And they need to do that to maintain the trust of members. So that interpersonal dynamics and political and environmental contexts a human input is critical there. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Bernice, for your contribution. I'd like to invite Tatiana to share your thoughts on this question. Tatiana, please.
I believe that once you are leading a team, as you promote and foster a democratic spirit, a democratic approach among the members of our team, as you allowed a broad participation by all staff in the development of the proposals that are submitted and presented, making it so that they have a voice, come up with their opinion, and as they debate, discuss with our colleagues. I consider this to be a very important approach. I usually say that an idea that comes out from the legislative director, it never comes out from one single meeting. We usually sit many times over and over again. We call our colleagues to talk, have conversations, and I believe this feeling of participation, this participatory spirit, the democratic participation by hearing and welcoming proposed ideas.
They allowed that they would accept modernization. I remember that we had a drastic change recently in one of the board of directors in drafting the minutes of the sessions. Because before the minutes, you have to hear everything that was said in the session, to transcribe it in the computer. The servant would take hours. And then the Mars directorate helped us, and today we do the transcription of the minute automatically. And now we'll be joined to like this video and broadcasted to all society. So I think that this change took a long time because why? Because people were used to do the drafting of the minute. So when we implemented this change, the first thing that the servants who were working in the staff, they looked at me and said, "We will no longer be needed." Well, this is not true because we need they do some fine tuning, some adjustments, so we still need them. I don't know for how long. But this participation, making them understand that we are creating tools that will be improving their lives, causes them to adhere to those changes. So I think that this modernization, it depends on the commitment of the team's commitment, but also depends especially on the chief's commitment, on the one who moves his team to convince them to play. This is my opinion. Obrigado, Tatiana. Well, very well. As Vlad said, it's a difficult path, but it's unavoidable. Reminding the words of Dirac in his book, The Nature of the Chaotic Age. That is, we have a chaos. We have to put in an order. On top of that, the Federal Senate, we adopted each month the so-called the brainstorming morning, and then from there the servants have an active voice to inform to the high direction of the House where we can improve. We have several examples of the room of maternity, parking spaces, the fuel electric cars, the management plan, where some sectors have an opportunity to accomplish their activities remotely. With that, we made it flexible to the servants' schedule, and they can even have a deliverable, more efficient deliverable. So there's also a space we can conduct a training of activities, of workout, wrestling. So we have that too. We can do that too. So in this regard, it increases the morale of the servant by bringing them more motivation, enthusiasm, and by performing their activities better. Recently, it was created that the performance gratification, that any servers that would excel, they have the gratification and they receive a financial benefit. All of that leads to think also about the expert degree bonus, that if they have a master degree or doctorate degree, they have another percentage. This is in our legal framework for the servants. So I believe that this possibility of seeking within the effective body or commissioned bodies of the houses can assist and help to better ideas for the parliamentarians themselves. They need the support of each one. The ideas that each one have. The parliamentary do not know what an AI is sometimes, how it works, how that in the case, even to bring something dangerous, because see that when we have within this greater expression of the artificial intelligence itself, it will be in this case, even bringing a dehumanization. This is a danger, so we can have, so it is precisely serving themselves. If they are to use the artifact, they must have its responsibility and ethics. Federal Senate created a group of AI group precisely to do, especially on the administrative processes, the legislative processes that are in the House. This facilitated a lot. Each one of the co-workers and also the parliamentarians themselves, whenever there's a need to have a requirement or speech or even an idea of a bill that they're seeking, all the metadata of the jurisprudence of the federal constitution states in the website. With each of those articles that if you verify there, they have some kind of judicial decisions showing that that device can result in a regulation of the Constitution. This is my contribution. Obrigado, Luís. Antes de eu fechar esse painel, gostaria de abrir para dúvidas, perguntas.
If you have it. Sean, please. They're getting the microphone. One moment, please. Here.
My name is Sean McSpaden from the state of Oregon in the United States. Thank you all for your great insights, your best practice advice for all of us. I had a question for the panel, whoever might want to respond. We've talked a lot about the potential use of artificial intelligence to improve our operations, to improve productivity, to provide better service. But when we do utilize those tools, I'd love to get your thoughts on how transparent we need to be that we're actually using those tools, disclosing the use of the tools to employees, to our constituents, to the legislative members that we all work with and serve. So we'd love to get your thoughts on the importance of that. And also, in terms of our work with our private sector software and service vendors in the technology space, how important is it for them to disclose to us that their tools include these kinds of artificial intelligence capabilities? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Just before I yield the floor, just one very brief comment. Many years ago, I read a publication, a book from Yuval Harari, and one of these publications, he mentions about the trust between people genuinely discussing their issues, the issues of their communities. And I remember a discussion he participated a few years after the publication, where he mentioned the situation where the person would join into the parliamentary website, use the chatbot, and genuinely think he or she, they are discussing with another human being, trying to convince the algorithm about their position. So, and it was a very interesting consideration when he mentioned that that would be one of the biggest breach of trust between the institution and the people, because even if there is a disclaimer, it needs to be alerted in a very how can I say, in a very obvious way for the person that they are not engaged with another human being. But I'd like to yield the floor to any colleague that wishes to respond. Wade, would you like to?
That's good.
That's a great question, Sean. And I would like to combine it with a question that was asked earlier about combining an AI draft with an attorney draft. Because my short answer is I don't know the answer. The reason I don't know the answer is because I, the drafter, take on the responsibility of being faithful to the member's policy. I want to be clear, I want to be coherent, I want to be concise, you know, and meet all those other metrics. But ultimately, if the member I'm drafting for doesn't want any of that, I need to be faithful to the member's policy. And when I hand the member a bill or an amendment, I am saying that to the best of my ability, this bill will do what you asked me for, nothing more, nothing less. If I have that AI drafted piece, if it's short, it's easy enough for me to incorporate it into my analysis and work with it. It just becomes almost like a form that I would keep, and I'm just going to cut and paste from a form I already had. If it's something that's 100 pages long and they wanted it in 5 minutes, it's clear that I'm not going to be able to evaluate that at all. So what I do now in that context is say, I have not reviewed this at all. I think I should add in, and oh, by the way, AI did 90% of it. If you want to go ahead, it's at your risk. I'm passing that risk on to you. It actually raises one more question that I think might be a whole nother conference, which is as we incorporate these more advanced tools, where in the legislative process do we want to deploy our resources? Where should legal review and legal participation be? Are we going to continue in the way that we currently work? And it works, as I understand it, very differently for a parliament compared to a Congress. So in the U.S., all the drafting happens in the Congress, and that means that we mix up messaging bills with serious policy proposals. And if the speed continues to increase, the quality will continue to decrease. And is that spreading out of the legal resource a good idea? I can advise my members and say, I don't think so. And they'll come right back and say, well, where should it be? And so a rethinking of the legislative process, or at least how resources are deployed, I think will be one of the inevitable consequences of introducing AI into the legislative process in a real serious way where it writes amendments and bills.
Luís?
Sim. Só para colaborar,
To cooperate, in Brazil, we have budgetary legislative processes where the amendments laid out by the parliamentarians are so-called impositive amendments that deserve traceability. Whenever there's a destination of allocation of resources for municipalities in any land of a state, will be getting to the public manager through a tool called Lexor, and also the Transferry Gov, which is transparent. And there's a billions and trillions of data about the union's budget that every citizen have access to without the need of a password and anything. With that, they can, with this inspection, to be helped also by the natural languaging process of those that obviously know the budgetary of allocation in that sense. So even we had judiciary interfering, we're having this traceability. Today, the National Brazilian Congress is prepared to show with that those amounts are being allocated. So to monitor laws, to monitor then public policies, management of health, education, safety, and mobility, it is something that is in the agenda of all the parliamentarians, even here in the Legislative Assembly. Certainly, that was it. Gostaria de comentar.
Thanks, Luís. Yeah, I think it's just a very general principles-based response, which is that I think there are scales, or is a scale of use that, depending on where the use is in that scale, has a different disclosure obligation. For example, I think that if we were using AI to analyse a submission to a committee inquiry, I think that absolutely carries a disclosure of an obligation disclosure, to the extent of probably putting advice on the website before a person made that submission, that AI may be used to analyse it. And I think that's really important because it goes to trust and what we or what the Parliament is going to do with that information that that person has generously given the Parliament in order to help it make its decisions. I think that they're owed that, especially if there's a risk that that information then is turned into something else, which can then again be turned into something else, and so on. So I think that's really important. I think also we had some discussion yesterday about when AI is used for answers as opposed to ideas. And I think that if it's used for answers, generally there should be a disclosure about that. I don't think necessarily there should be if it's used to generate an idea that you then go and research and decide whether you want to do something else with. That's just my personal view.
Thank you, Bernice, for your comments. Tatiana, would you like to comment something?
O uso da tecnologia, ela deve ampliar o acesso à população, deve ampliar o acesso da população ao parlamento. Quanto mais transparente, melhor.
And these legislative activities, they must be broadcasted live. I think that we need digital repositories and reports of the parliamentarian activities must be made accessible online. I think that transparency, including in use or not of an AI, must be there. I always stand up for that. The transparency is quite important. Citizens must be aware of it, not just what we're doing, but how we're doing it. Agora vamos para as últimas palavras da nossa mesa.
With you, Luís, if a very short final message, we are a little bit over time, so please feel free to.
Ok. Muito bem. Qual o cuidado que nós devemos...
So what is the care that we must have in terms of AI? The co-pilot of humanity. Because this is a danger, right? See, we had that grocery store some years back. Then it turned into a supermarket with more products larger than a grocery. And then the hypermarket. So then with more products. So this will happen with AI. AI is like this. In 5 years or more, will be a super AI, hyper AI. This is natural. This is the tendency. That's how humanity goes.
And concerning AI in lawmaking, let's avoid the tyranny of efficiency. It's dangerous because when you impose something, usually we say it can be pushed down the throat into society, and it's not good. And we should be rather careful when we apply AI. Of course, we need it for quality legislation and to have a positive social impact we all wish for. It's important to have it, but anyway, we need to take caution. I'd like to thank you for the participation in this panel. Thank you, Luís. Bernice, você gosta de compartilhar?
Thank you. Just to make some personal observations, I guess, but they're more about the learnings that I've attained over the last few days, and they relate to a much greater appreciation of some of the possibilities that lie before us, as well as the need to think carefully about governance. I feel that I probably have a greater capacity to understand what to look for in terms of effective governance of AI as it inevitably rolls out. And we talked about having goals for modernisation in place. And in my view, those goals should relate directly to furthering the core functions of the Parliament, not to a technology end in itself. Along the way, sure, but every technology goal needs to be linked back to what it is that the Parliament's job is, and to the higher level principles around democracy. And I just wanted to repeat my deep appreciation for being invited to participate here by the Legislative Assembly and Bússola Tech, and I've learned a lot, made lots of new connections to help keep learning, which is something, continuous learning is a big part of who I am, and I hope I've shared some information that is of interest to others too. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernice. It's much appreciated your participation here today in the panel and also in your presentation as well. Wade, would you like to share your final thoughts?
Thank you, Luís. I think my final thoughts are very similar to what we've already heard, in that a very important, whatever we do in the developments in the future is the importance of maintaining trust in the process. The trust that a member has in the drafter, a trust that members have in each other, a trust that the public has for the Congress or the Parliament. We've already heard that that's under assault, and regaining that trust is really important for democracy and the rule of law. The second observation is that people are really important to the process. And I definitely agree with Luís Fernandez that efficiency in and of itself is not a good thing, that people are important, and if we treat people well, if people come first, I think the rest will take care of itself. And with that, I too am very appreciative of the invitation to be here, to participate in the panel. I have learned a lot, both in the formal sessions and in informal conversations, and I'm continuing, or I'm looking forward to continuing to learn a lot more.
Thank you, Wade, for your contribution, for your participation here today in the panel and yesterday in the presentation of the comparative print suite as well. Much appreciated. Tatiana?
Eu gostaria
Tatiana, I'd like to thank these guests that came from so far away, other countries, to share their experiences here in the Northeast Brazil, in this state of Brazil. Thank you for coming. I'd like to thank the President Ezequiel, who supported this initiative, Mr. Augusto, Mario, and you, Luís. So let me thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, all colleagues here in the panel. It was an honor to moderate you. And with that, I declare this panel finished. Thank you.
Mais uma vez, eu gostaria de convidar os participantes.
All participants to stand in front of this panel table so that we can take a collective picture and record this moment.
Neste ínterim, o cerimonial aproveita para...
We'd like to thank you on behalf of LegisTech, Wade, Ballou, Mr. Watson, Tatiana, Cunha, Luís, Fernando, Pires, Machado, all of you panel participants. I'd like to thank you for your contributions.
Vamos aproveitar então este momento.
Let's take advantage of this moment as we approach the closing of this event. We already missed it. I'd like to invite Luís Kimaid, the CEO of Bússola Tech, to address the audience. Sérgio, one of our hosts here, he also will address the audience to conclude the event. So very briefly, a few words. I'd like to thank all of those who attended to this meeting. Especially I'd like to thank the president of this house, Ezequiel, together with Dr. Luís Carlos, who gave a full support so that this event could occur. All the assemblies present here who responded to our calls, we thank you for attending to our invitation to come. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you. And also I thank all the administrative departments of this assembly. I will not dare to mention the name of every person because I may forget someone. All those who contributed and put their soul working hard within these 2 days, but the work actually started way before during the preparations of this event. After this beautiful panel, before we finish, I'd just like to say that I have no doubts that actually within a short period of time, the next step that AI will accomplish is to reach the level of human intelligence. Yes, actually, next, now I'd like to invite the Bússola Tech CEO, Luís, to close this event. Em nome da minha segurança.
I don't want to be the person between us and happy hour, so I'll keep it short. Thank you very much to Augusto Viveiros, the Honorable Ezequiel Ferreira, the Speaker of this Honorable Assembly, Mário Sérgio Gurgel, my dear friend, and I will not name all of the public servants here of the Assembly to avoid committing the discourtesy of forgetting anyone, but to thank for all of the kindness that you shown to our organization, to our honorable international participants, to the assemblies participating here today. I was absolutely amazed. Eu fiquei maravilhado, Dr. Augusto.
I was really amazed with your generosity, the president and all the team of the assembly. I'm so thankful. Like you said yourself during the dinner time yesterday, gratitude was a term that really touched me. So deeply from my heart, I like to express my gratitude to you, to Marcelo. Please communicate my feelings to him. Eu posso falar também em nome do nosso colega.
That the feeling is mutual, of the gratitude for being so well received. And I want to express our gratitude, and I believe I can speak on the behalf of the Assembly as well, to you. The reason for us to be here today, the colleagues that traveled to Natal, to this beautiful city, William Clark that traveled all the way from Colorado to be here, Grant Vergotini traveled from California, many hours, Sean Max Payton also from the US, from Oregon, Fotis Vitsilis, he came from the birthplace of democracy. We were discussing this yesterday at dinner. Ornella and also Martin from the beautiful city of Buenos Aires. Our friend Roberto, which we learn is also an Argentinian, but came representing the Ontario Legislative Assembly in Canada. Bernice, who so generously traveled so long to be here with us as well. Andy, who traveled all the way from Scotland. Wade Ballou, my dear friend and counselor in many different times, who came to visit us from Washington, D.C. And my dearest friend, Luís Fernando Pires Machado, who traveled from very short, but it's very deep in our hearts as a very close friend. So my deepest appreciation to all of you, to my dear friends and the Legislative Assemblies from Brazil, aos queridos colegas e amigos da Assembleia
do Brazil, the colleagues of the Legislative Assembly of Brazil who responded to this special call. Thank you for coming. I thank you all. It's been a great honor to welcome all of you. Looking forward to have you back again in the next discussions, which needs to have continuity. I usually say that the forces that detest, that hate the legislative power cooperate. We should do it moreover with more strength to protect this institution from our side fiercely. Tendo dito isso, eu termino minhas considerações.
For your time. Thank you.
Agora. And to wrap up this farewell speech, I'd like to invite Mr. General Director of the Legislative Assembly of Rio Grande do Norte, Augusto Viveiros, who will also be giving a present, a kit here for you as a souvenir to this moment, to this assembly. So I'd like to call here next to me Mário Sérgio and the directors. Sorry.
Tatiana,
please. And
mais algum não, né?
Anybody else? Any director here? Any other director?
Nós queremos
We want to now to give to the speakers a present, a souvenir for you, even though we believe that the greatest gift in each one's mind by your attendance, the conversations we had, the everything that we heard, for everything. So I'd like to ask, let us begin to award them. Please go ahead. He wants to take my job. Luís Kimaid.
Vá de Ballou. Tatiana, por favor, entrega a Tatiana.
Grande.
Mário.
Fotis Fitsilis.
Lucineiro, por favor.
Roberto Eberhardt.
Tatiana.
Andy Beatty.
Mário 6.
Martim Montes.
Doutor Lucineiro.
William Clark.
Mário 6. Não, Tatiana. Desculpe. Terminou, não? Falta quanto? 4? Não.
Sean McSpaden.
Mário 6.
Ornella Vanzilota. Bernice Watson.
Eu vou falar sobre o livro. Só tem esse livro aqui? Só? Então pronto, diga lá.
Antes de entregarmos o próximo...
We're handing this as a present. 2 books. One is the history of the Legislative Assembly of Rio Grande do Norte. This book was written by Luís da Câmara Cascudo, which is considered by us the greatest writer in our state, Rio Grande do Norte. He's deceased, known all over Brazil. He wrote, and Ezequiel, President, wrote the introduction. There's one of his statements I really enjoy. Quote, "No one writes history. We write to history." It is really deep, these words, and I really appreciate it. No one writes history. We write to history. Another one, it is a book on the years of life, the life cycle of the Assembly. It was back in 2017 we began to award this. Even today, it represents a living history that was painted of the Legislative Assembly. The whole history is here. Who's next? The next one, Luís Fernando Pires Machado. He was my boss when I was working in the Senate. No, my last words. The last word, I'll be making a comparison here now. Who does not know to put the flags in the right order cannot study artificial intelligence. They cannot. The flags are not in order. According to the rule of the house, they're not arranged in order. Why? Because Brazilian flag, which is our national flag, must be in the middle. It's not in the middle. So the one who cannot arrange a flag, can you help me here to arrange it properly here to the middle? They cannot work with artificial intelligence. Well, finally, the last history. We began a project in the strategic planning, a little different. We want to build a pyramid. We want to build a pyramid. Of course, it will not be a pyramid like the Egyptian pyramids, Cheops, Khafre, and Mycerinus, but it's a pyramid that will be giving a different shape to the work of the assembly. In this pyramid, it is there. The 17 items of the SDG. We began to implement the system. We are researching all of the data for us to have in all the municipalities in the Rio Grande do Norte state. We'll be reaching the UNESCO agenda, which is exactly this. This will be a different way to show. For example, I'm the congressman of a municipality in the interior, Kaiko, the city of Kaiko. Then I'll be doing an amendment for a school. Then we can subsidize them. They don't need school, it's here. Look at their index. They need education or any other thing. So we'll be having all the index compiled to define the direction of investments in the state. This is an ambitious project, but that we're beginning now with that. We have those cubes representing the SDGs. Will be above all fulfilling the desire of Ezequiel Ferreira, Congressman. Really appreciate it. Do me a favor. Do me just one favor. Come again. Come again. Come again. We'll be here with our arms wide open to have and receive every one of you here. Thank you very much. This ceremony on behalf of LegisTech, thanks for your presence of all of you. And we'd like to invite you all to have a socialization moment and a happy hour that will take place in the events in the first floor. Have a good evening. Safe travels home.